Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Persons. I am the Chief Scientist of the U.S. Government Accountability Office, or the GAO. For those of you who are interested in the GAO, learning more about us, we are an oversight, insight, and foresight professional services organization serving the U.S. Congress. So we do a very broad array of work, including technology and foresight work, of which one piece I'll be speaking to you about today, particularly with respect to big data, to a certain extent the IoT or the Internet of Things work that we've initiated. And then certainly there was a request to talk about blockchain technology as well, all of which I think are profoundly important, particularly for you all, our colleagues over in Europe and doing your work in the banking, financial sectors, and so on. So I apologize I could not be there in person, or at least even in a live video. But I hope that this will suffice for discussions, and certainly Mihaela has my contact information, and if any of you wish to connect offline, then I'm sure that she'll be happy to provide that to you, and we can do that. So let me just start by wishing you all greetings, and I hope that your proceedings in the conference there is going well. The first thing that Mihaela had asked me to discuss was about big data. There's a lot, of course, going on in big data, and we are in the middle of one of two studies on the topic. The first study having to do with the implications coming out of the private sector context of big data. That is to say, what's going on out there in the commercial marketplace, and then how it's affecting various sectors of the economy. Three that we've picked out just as instantiations to write foresight profiles on are with respect to what big data is doing in healthcare, what big data is doing in the financial markets sector, and then what big data is doing for intelligent transport, all of which I think are relevant to you all as an audience, as well as just our various countries and what we're doing. So the conversation that we're attempting to have and ultimately write in terms of a strategic report has to do with understanding the baseline of what big data is, where it is proliferating or growing in the time right now, and then look at toward the future the opportunities and challenges therein, and then ultimately, if anything comes out of this strategic discussion that are implications for my particular clients, which are various committees of the U.S. Congress. For this particular study, it's 4 separate committees and a handful of other individual members in both of our parties here in the U.S., Republicans and Democrats, and in both chambers. Since we're bicameral, we have a Senate and we have a House as well. And so there's a very passionate interest in this, and particularly in terms of what this means. I'll have to confess right off the bat, I am not a fan of big data as a moniker. I just don't think it does well with the imprecision of the English language. But nevertheless, we must live with that, and I think the best way to think about big data as a topic is not only the concept of bigness with the size of the data, or what are called the volume of data, where now we're getting in beyond, we now have, for example, terabyte size hard drives. Now we're talking increasingly about the next level up. 1,000 times a terabyte is a petabyte, and then 1,000 times a petabyte is an exabyte, and so on as you go up and up. This is particularly coming about as you see more and more data being put onto the internet with a capital I, being moved around. I think particularly in the volume conversation about the rise of the 4K high-def televisions that now you can purchase in your stores, and then the streaming data from services like Netflix here in the U.S. I believe it's also sold in Europe, about pushing a button and instantaneously expecting 4K high-def TV around. That is indeed a lot of infrastructure requirements to put that amount of volume on to watch your House of Cards or your various shows that you like on Netflix. So that's part and parcel of the big data conversation. The second piece has to do with the rapidity or the rate at which data is moving around, or which data is coming. And I would just refer to our National Institutes of Health has a genomic sequencing graph that I like to speak to that basically shows in a semi-logarithmic way the linear decrease, which in a semi-log plot, the decrease linearly is, of course, an exponential drop. But the linear decrease since 2001, when the U.S. government spent $100 million to sequence the first human genome, nowadays we're getting down, it's hovering around the price in 2015 of about $7,000. And so it's nearing an era where medical information, where your personal human genome might be able to meet the price point as something of what we pay for our tablets or our laptops. And indeed, that would be powerful on terms of how that's doing. But in the big data conversation, just the velocity of that, the amount of information coming out, and what that means for pharmaceutical drug design, what it means for personalized medicine, what it means for healthcare risk and assessment and insuring and things, is indeed a very big issue. And so that's part also of the big data conversation. And then the third piece in big data, the way we think about it, is just the concept of the analysts and the tools, the analytic structure to do those things. Related to this, of course, is the idea of the rise of the Internet of Things. And so that is feeding into things. The IoT is best understood really as anything that's connected with an Internet Protocol address, or IP. It could be your bioinstrumentation device that we wear on our wrist, or Fitbit, and so on. It could be your smartphone, of course, that's already connected to the network. Obviously, any computer, tablet, laptop, and so on. But increasingly, the Nest devices here in the U.S., which are thermostat control systems, you can think about all the sensor systems. There's just an incredible amount of power coming down to do that. And so I see IoT as just adding into, or a part of, the big data piece, and indeed we're looking at that. And so that's our current study doing on these things. We are indeed seeing key challenges, which are very important going on in Brussels and the major capitals, as well as here in the U.S., are the concerns about privacy, civil liberties, and so on. So that is a key element of this. We all, I think all of our economic ministers and our committees and our leadership would like to have an innovation-based economy. That's a big word today, in the data as an asset. Data economics, I think, are still relatively nascent and are needing to grow. And so the understanding of what big data can do in an innovation economy, and yet while trying to preserve civil liberties and personal privacy, is a very big issue indeed. It's easy to say but hard to do, and it's going to require complex adaptive solutions, I think, in order to do that. And that's what we're seeing out of our study. We are doing here at GAO a second study that's going to be coming in the future, having to do with big data's implication for the public sector in terms of its oversight, not just in fraud analytics and things, but also in program evaluation and in understanding things like improper payments and overlap and duplication. So stay tuned for that, and I'll be happy to stay in touch and speak with you all more in that regard. Mihail also asked me to speak to a little bit about the blockchain technology. I'll just say a few words about this, particularly because of this particular conference and its focus on finance ministries and banking regulation and things. I think one of the most disruptive aspects of the blockchain technology is really the disintermediation that is going on in the financial sector. Blockchain now allows for radical transparency and for the establishment of ability of peer-to-peer contracting type relationships that heretofore could not have been done without banking intermediaries or regulatory structures and other things. And so we really are going to see, I think, a radical disintermediation of things, some for the good and some to the challenge of what we do now. That is to say, a lot of our banking institutions are in effect going to be diminished as the intermediaries or the middlemen in financial transactions and so on. And you're just going to be having things using blockchain technology like Bitcoin, but not only that, other technologies doing that. We're seeing this, for example, even in the rise of legitimate real estate contracts in the country of Honduras, where in the past it had been a system that was rife with corruption and understanding whether or not you actually hold title to a land and all the liens and the things that are going on in the older system. Using blockchain technology now, Hondurans are able to, with very high accuracy and fidelity, to have contracting relationships and to make it clear, provably and transparently so in a very public way, the fact that they hold title or own a piece of land. And it's transforming what's going on in that country, as one example. Obviously, in transactions here in the U.S. and I think around the world, there's Bitcoin and things there. You're getting out of the realm of sovereign currencies. And so the idea of what governments may be able to do in sovereign currencies as affected by the blockchain is indeed a disruptive conversation as well. So those are just some initial, I think, impressions on these things. Again, I'm going to, for brevity's sake, I'm going to sign off for now, but let me just say thank you all for your interest in the conversation. Again, I apologize I could not do this in person and interact with you, but I do see some significant things going on in the big data domain. It's why we're doing 2 major studies on it. We also are doing a technology assessment in Internet of Things, and then blockchain is something we have done some work on here at GAO, but aspire to do more of. So I'll send you my best regards. For any information that you all would like to hear about our past studies or what we're doing, feel free to go to www.gao.gov. And when the splash page comes up, you'll find an orange medallion midway down your screen on the web browser that is called Technology Assessment. So if you click on that, you'll see what we're doing. And I hope that you found our time worthwhile here this morning. Thank you all.